Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday Morning Meeting. I'm Wilson Cole. I am president and CEO of Adams, Evans, and Ross. And I'm joined by our in-house attorney and my lovely daughter, Samantha. Hey, Samantha, how are you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing fine. This podcast, we're going to cover something, and I'm always reluctant to cover it. Because I don't want folks to think that we're making excuses. I mean, we're certainly not infallible. I think we have a process that's going to get anything that should be collected. But, there's times where we're always learning and evolving like any other company. But occasionally, we have a client that gets upset that they turn over an account to us and we're not able to collect it. The good news is 80% of the time we're going to be able to collect it, so 4 out of 5 we will. Bad news is 1 out of 5 we won't. About half of those we'll recommend for suit. Half of them we recommend that you don't go after it for suit. And so I kind of want to go over, just as you're going through your accounts and you're saying, okay, should I turn this over? Should I not turn this over? I'm always a little reluctant because most of the time the clients don't think they have a claim when in essence they have a very valid claim, and we collect hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars for clients that didn't think that they had it. But this is the other side of that equation where somebody gets mad, and I'm going to use an example of something somewhere we had. They turned over an account to us a week ago. The phone numbers are disconnected. They've been out of business for 3 years, and they're mad that we're not able to collect. Under those scenarios, I mean, keep in mind, and Sam's going to go into more detail, but keep in mind, corporations exist solely for the benefit of protecting individuals from personal liability. LLCs work the same way. But there's probably about a half a dozen reasons why you can run it through collections, you can sue it, but you're not going to get paid. The biggest reason is if they're out of business and they've been out of business for 3 years, having us try to go after it. I mean, if you need us to look at it, to claim it as dead, to where you can write it off, I have no issue with doing it. But Sam, kind of go over some of the scenarios that you've run into where we weren't able to collect on an account and the specific reasons why.
Yeah, I think, my big thing is when we're not saying determine this on your own, before you turn over an account. This is more kind of an overview of don't call me, raising Cain when we say here's what's going on, because there should be other ways of, doing it. Sometimes there are bounds that we just can't due to licensing and insurance and confidentiality that's not only to protect us, but to protect you in the end, because whatever we do, we're acting as your agent. And so the big things are we're going to run into the business, the business is closed, and well, you have a cell phone. Well, it may be a cell phone that doesn't identify who it is. If, we're dialing, 123-555, we can't leave a message in a lot of cases, because is it still that person? Are we now just calling, somebody's grandmother who has no idea the number that she has and, why they're calling about staffing? We have no idea.
Well, it equally is important to that, even if it's the owner and they've been out of business 3 years, if they don't have a personal guarantee, chances of recovery are pretty slim.
Exactly. And then it can also get into, if there's not a personal guarantee, is it getting into fair debt and collection of going after an individual if it's not identifying as the corporate name that was the contract was signed under?
Good point.
And so we have that side of, yes, you did give us phone numbers and you called it and it's working. Well, it was a cell phone, and that can cause issues. Or, well, they've reopened, a different business, and it's like sometimes you can do continuation of business. But if this is one of those situations where, it's somebody that down the street or, and they were doing lawn care and now they're doing something completely different, that's a completely different company. You can't go after those.
Yep.
And then, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because there again, back to the same thing. If you don't have a personal guarantee, that owner of the business didn't owe you. The business is what owed you. So
And then also when it comes to if we reach out or if you get a notice and there's a bankruptcy, we have to halt everything for 90 days. We have to, our forwarding attorneys have to, everything stops. On some of them, we'll look at it and go, we've got to close this account. There, because there are, a whole list of things that it'll say. And some of them, it'll look at it and go, okay, we'll calendar or forwarding counsel say, hey, we just got the bankruptcy notice. I think there's going to be an asset just, distribution that they can see some funds. So I'll reach out to you, in 4 or 5 months.
Sure.
Then that's also going to be, we're still working it, but we're not going to have an update. Mm-hmm. Because it literally sits still for 90 days.
Well, legally, we cannot contact the debtor. We can't contact their attorneys. I mean, they are under the protection of the United States government when they file a bankruptcy.
And so those are kind of the common ones that halt everything in their tracks. If they've gone out of business or they've gone out of business and opened a new business, but still they've gone out of business. And then, the bankruptcy of they may not have gone out of business, but there's nothing that can be done after that point, or very little, and only in certain aspects can anything be done.
Well, and those are debtor-related problems that we have no control over, and the client really has, at that point, has no control over. I can go through the fact of if somebody's filed bankruptcy or they've gone out of business. Now, this isn't true 100% of the time, but 95% of the time is you had warning signals that you could have probably gotten paid 6 months or a year earlier. They chose not to pay attention to those warning signals and move a little quicker. But at that point, once they've gone bankrupt, it's a moot issue. Those are debtor-related reasons why we don't get paid. And since we did a few weeks ago, we did that you have the right to shut up if a debtor tells you they're not going to pay episode. I've had, and I don't know if people are punking me or they're going out to just see if they can, hold my beer. I'm going to do one even worse. We had one where somebody sent out an email and they told them that they didn't know it and what have you. I mean, they may have even said, I'm kind of paraphrasing, it's not legally owed under any circumstances, so help me God. And then they're mad that we're not able to do it. I had one just the other week where there was a dispute and they came to terms. They got one of the placements paid and they made the other one. They said, hey, if we ever replace it, then you'll owe us the balance. Well, on that scenario, there's an agreement. We can't go after that balance if they haven't done the other things or different scenarios. If you make an agreement or you sign a release, and that's the big one that Sam has an issue with, we'll get in an account and find out that they signed a settlement where they went from 20,000 down to 10, and they're mad that we won't go after the 10. Because they signed, the client signed a release and they now want to claim duress. Sam, go ahead and give your spill on duress and how that's really not going to be a very good defense at all.
That is somewhere, I don't know what, online business YouTube that everybody is hearing this, but the amount that I am hearing it scares me that there's something out there giving this much misinformation of, well, if you sign it under duress, it doesn't count. By the word, that is true. However, the word duress, to get it overturned, for that reason, the courts are pretty much looking at were you or an immediate family member in grave danger. And I probably have caught clients off guard more than I care to admit of when they go, I was under duress. I'm like, I really don't think that's the case. And I finally just have to, and I'll explain it and I'll go through. And finally I'll go, was there a gun to your head? Well, no. Was there a gun to your kid's head? Why are you asking that? And it's like, because that is the only time I have seen where, and I mean, there are exceptions and things like that, but with business those exceptions, usually it's a familial relationship and there's all the fun dynamics that go along with family that can change it. In an arm's length transaction on businesses, gun to your head is pretty much the rule of thumb that I'm going to use for if you are under duress.
So the defense of duress, does it, they owed me 20, I really needed the cash, so I took the 10. It does not reach that level of duress. Okay. So, we're going to do everything that we can. And there's going to be times, I'm sure over the last 27 years where there was something maybe we should have collected. I can't point my finger to it. I know here in the last 10 years, we've got a system that is, just so everybody knows, it runs through our collection process, but then before it even goes out to our forwarding attorneys, it touches Sam's desk. So you have the best of both worlds. You have an agency that has all of the knowledge and the resources of the staffing and recruiting industry, but we also have our own in-house attorney, which your single practitioner attorney is not going to have the resources to locate assets, the access to the case law that we run through with the forwarding attorneys, and then also the tidbits of, Sam's, looking over 4,000 cases a year in some form or fashion. And so we kind of see the cutting edges where it may take you a few years for your single practitioner to find it. But even more so than that is once your single practitioner gets a judgment, they don't have the resources to locate the assets the way that we do. But there's only so much that we can do. And if a company is bouncing checks to you, or if they have gone silent, you need to turn it over to us. If you wait, and I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to a client, I'll talk to a client in February, and then in August, they'll call me back and they'll say, hey, Wilson, you and I talked about this one. Now their phone number's disconnected. Can you help me? It's like, you've got to be kidding. We maybe could have done something back in February, but if that phone number's disconnected, you've waited too late. If you decide to sign off on an agreement because you need the cash in March, you can't call us in May and say, well, it was under duress. I'd really like to go back and get the rest of it. So, the biggest thing is just follow a system and understand that there's going to be certain circumstances where, especially on bigger companies, when a bigger company, you don't see the same warning signs, kind of like Enron back, 20 years ago. If you've got a CFO that understands cash flow, a company can lose money for years and decades. GM taught us that. It's when you run out of cash, that's when you go out of business. So if you've got somebody that has the ability to manage their cash flows, they may be going along fine and then they just implode. But anyway, there's going to be some certain number that we're not going to be able to. Sam, do you have any closing remarks before we wrap up this episode of our podcast?
I think on the timing thing is when you see the warning signs, sooner the better, because what's worse than calling and saying, hey, we can't collect, is calling and saying, hey, remember when we collected for you 45 days ago, we just got notice from the bankruptcy court that it's being recovered.
Exactly. And that's something, go ahead.
You now have to pay it back.
And that's something that I want to cover in a future episode in detail, but nutshell of what Sam just talked about was there is a clawback or a look back period where if a company pays you and they file bankruptcy within 90 days, there is a possibility and even probability that if they were behind with you when they paid you, you're going to have to get those funds back. That's a deep topic for another time. But time is of the essence. Once you establish that the company is having a problem, the squeakier wheel will get the grease, and so the sooner the better. But excellent point on that, Sam. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this issue of our podcast. If you would subscribe to our podcast below, that way you'll get notified every week when a new one of these goes up. Go ahead and make comments in the subject line if you've got any suggestions, or if you had a different reality with different things, let us know that about as well, and we'll certainly pick that up in future podcasts to discuss. Well, Sam, thanks for joining me. Everybody, we'll see you next week.